does it look like when the worlds of music and social justice intersect? That's the question that I look at on this podcast. It's called It's Giving, and it's hosted by me, Ingela Travers-Hayward. This week, it's giving Nick Carpenter from the band Medium Build. First of all, I was really lucky that Nick decided to talk to me, especially because when we did the interview, he was quite literally on the road on his way home after playing a huge festival. But beyond that, this is, if you can believe it, week 16 of this podcast. And as the show's evolved, I've had the privilege of hearing so many deeply personal stories from artists about how their life experience has shaped their advocacy. But this conversation with Nick is easily one of the most personal ones yet. He's lived such a fascinating life, growing up in the evangelical church, navigating his mental health, his sobriety, and so much more. He talks about all of that, but he also talks about, what happens when an artist does open up about these really personal struggles, and what happens when these personal struggles come to define who you are to the public. So his conversation is really enlightening. I also really liked he mentioned the fact that it is really wacky to go from having $50 in your bank account to suddenly having your career blow up, and now you're invited into all these VIP areas and all these people want something from you. So it's a great episode, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. If this is your first time listening, though, please go in, rate, review, subscribe. All that support just gives me the momentum to keep pushing this forward. But with that, here's Nick's episode. One of the first things I wanted to talk to you about actually sort of involves traveling and stuff like that, because this last weekend was the Newport Folk Festival. And so, for people who don't know, A, it's an amazing festival, but B, they have the Newport Folk Foundation, and you did something with them. So I thought, to me, I just felt like it was such a perfect example of here's a musician using their music to give back. And so I was wondering if you could just talk about how you worked with them this year.
Yeah, I thought it was so cool that they do what they do. They reached out to me and said, "Do you have a music program that was close to your heart that you'd want to donate instruments to or make a donation to?" Blah blah blah. And I really thought hard because I kind of have a lot of spiritual homes, right? Like I grew up in the suburbs of Atlanta, and I have the area, the music programs that I was involved in. But then I spent a decade in Alaska. That's where my brother's raising his kids. And that kind of feels where, that's where I built the band. That's kind of like a
Yeah.
spiritual home. And then I've been in Tennessee for forever, and I have cousins, and my cousins are raising kids all throughout the South. So I wanted to, I was my baby cousin was learning piano in this small town in Georgia. Maybe I should make the donation there. So I was thinking about all these places, and I ended up picking the high school that my niece was going to at the time. And yeah, and that's in Anchorage. It's Bartlett High School, and it's sort of it is the least desirable high school to go. It's not where you would think it's not where the yuppie rich arts kids are going, right? It's more about sports. And I wanted to pick that because I feel like if I gave back to my high school, they don't need it. I'd rather go to the place where my niece was listening to Paramore CDs, and it's a little rougher.
Yeah.
It's kids, I just think, and when I went and we did the guitars, it was I couldn't stop crying just seeing these kids. And some of them were clowning on me. They're what are you doing? What is this old head uncle doing here, talking about music? But it was so tender, and I don't know. Music is really powerful, and even when you don't think it is, even as a kid, but all those kids use music as some form of escape. And for me, that was really important when I was a teenager, was to have alone time with my guitar, in orchestra, in chorus, in church choir, whatever. There's some sort of healing property in it, however you can get attached to it. So yeah, that was really powerful for me.
Well, that's, you kind of mentioned it, but I think that was one of the things I wanted to follow up with is what does it feel like to have chosen a career that allows you to do stuff like this, because I think, for the average person, working in an office or something, they don't often get those moments of, oh, here is like this really tangible way I can make a little bit of a difference in someone's life. So yeah, like what did it feel like to be able to do that?
It feels great. It's very new to me. Music and entertainment is such a funny it's such a funny career, right? You even just you saying like you chose a career where it's like I never thought of it as a career choice, right? It's like I bartended for a decade and played music, and then all of a sudden, you go from having like permanently having like $50 in your bank account to like being able to travel and have all these opportunities. And you used to save up for guitars, and now like Gibson is like, Try this guitar." You're like, wow, it's like really you swing this huge pendulum from like broke to privileged really quick, and it can go away really quickly. And so for me, if anyone's trying to give me free stuff and I can repurpose it, like if some brand is giving me clothes and I can give it to my brother, or a festival wants to gift me 20 guitars to give to a high school down the street from where I
Yeah.
lived, or my niece goes, it's like that's incredible. I think we everyone's living in these margins, and if you have a little extra and you can pass on it, it feels amazing. But I'm not trying to grip on to anything too tight, right? Because I know
Yeah.
in a year or two trends can change, and then I'm back to bartending or whatever. So like for me, it's I have to keep a light grip and know that stuff comes and goes.
Well, when you talk about that, like, rapid pendulum shift, right? And now you're someone that, yeah, someone comes to and says, okay, who do you want to donate 20 guitars to? I'm curious how that also extends to, like, okay, you're a person that people listen to now, And so not just your music, but also your messages and what you decide to talk about. And so I'm curious how you go about navigating what issues that are important to you that you want to talk about in public, right? Because I've read sort of some of your past interviews, and there's certain themes or certain things that you talk about that I'm going to ask you about. But I'm curious from your perspective, like, what are the issues that matter to you to talk about now that you do have people listening to you?
It's so funny. I never felt like, I was raised in the church, in the evangelical church in
Mm-hmm.
the South, which is so aggressively, the only message is like Jesus, accept Jesus, right? Go on mission trips, tell people about Jesus, tell your lost friends at school about Jesus. So it's like, it's this complete like mono focus, right? And then I left the church when I was 18, and then you go to college and you start waking up to like all the other stuff, right? It's like, oh, politics,
Yeah.
like war, gender, like class. And so you spend a decade like kind of like focusing that. And I was sort of apolitical, like coming out of my conservative bubble. I just was like, I'm just not going to participate. And then it took me living in Alaska
Yeah.
for a decade where I realized like, oh, local politics are really like really important and inform,
Mm-hmm.
who you vote for mayor depends on whether there's resources for like people living in homelessness, or if you vote for that tax, like it immediately affects people. And so it took me a long time to realize that one, that I did have a platform, and two, that it
Yeah.
could be of value. So yeah, it's a weird feeling to, I mean, one, even just someone listening to your songs or perceiving your lyric is crazy. And then realizing that you can try to enact change or care about stuff. So yeah, to answer your initial question, like what are the things that I care about? Like, I mean, class is kind of finance, like money and class and power are sort of the things that are really close to my chest. Like my dad grew up super poor and rural, and I think he spent his entire life obsessed with money and how he could class climb. And so to him, like I'm his wildest dreams, right? That I've gone from like
Yeah.
no degree to like, like Beverly Hillbillies type shit. Like it's
Yeah.
like here I am, like living his these dreams. And but for me, I have all this kind of class shame, right? I don't want
Mhm.
to own anything. I don't want to have I feel weird having access, going from a guy who couldn't afford to go to festivals and now I'm being paid to like hang out in the VIP tent shucking down oysters. I'm like, this is not real. Like this is not
Yeah.
a good thing. So I really like to poke power. Like that's where I think any concentration of power, whether that's political or social or trend, right? And then obviously like I've spent a lot of my career fighting my own alcoholism, so I like to poke that. I mean, I just like to poke stuff like whatever people think is normal. I'm like, why do we think that's normal? What is normal? Like, what are gender norms? What are political norms? What are social norms? Like, why? I think my biggest offering in my art and in my platform is just asking why. I don't really think I'm like a guy with a
Mhm.
message. Like I don't want to sell, especially coming out of the evangelical thing where it was always selling the Jesus stuff. I'm not here to peddle a belief system. I'm just here to make people think and make people feel, and hopefully people feel less alone when I say the ugly thing out loud. They're like, oh, that guy said that thing out loud. Like maybe I'm okay thinking or wondering. Because I grew up in an environment where questions weren't always uh, applauded, right? It's like, hey, don't ask that, just accept. And I don't
Yeah.
ever want to feel afraid to ask a question.
Do I think it's so fascinating that, and I totally understand it, this sentiment you have of, I don't wanna be the guy with the message, but I wanna look at why. And I'm curious, like, did it did that stance just come naturally, or were you ever, once you started getting bigger and bigger and bigger, was there ever this sort of back and forth of, should I be the guy with the message? Does that make sense? Like, I'm just curious of, how did
Totally.
you decide this? Yeah, okay, so you did, yeah.
I think, I mean, again, my career has been a 10-year slow
Yeah.
crawl, right? Like was no big pop off moment. You see celebrities on the red carpet, mic in their face, like, "Hey, what's your stance on Gaza?" And they just completely fumble it because
Yeah.
they don't even know. They're just like, and it's like, why do we care about this guy? Nobody knew who he was a year ago. And now we're like, Benson Boone needs to have correct takes on everything. It's like so much
Yeah.
pressure, and I feel bad for these kids that are thrown into it, and now they have to have coaches to just literally answer questions. But it happened for
Yeah.
me, like in Anchorage when we were really kind of coming up locally, 2016 to 2017, I was just working really hard trying to make the band better. And then 2018, 2019, again, this is in local Anchorage, our band started having more success. And so I started getting
Yeah.
invited to political dinners and stuff. And I think at that point, especially like after all the Me Too stuff and like in Trump's first presidency, it felt like you really needed to like be on the right side of power and like in the sort of social justice like thing of just like I need to make sure I'm on the right side of all this stuff. And I think in that fear of being wrong, you start kind of like parroting, you just kind of say whatever you're supposed to say in quotes, right? It's
Yep.
like, and then you have the
Mhm.
performative wokeness, like performative like stuff that you kind of see liberals fall into, where like, well, I don't want to be canceled. I just want to say the right thing. And it
Yeah.
started, I had a friend who grew up in the same sort of religious conformity thing as me. And she like really correctly like came to me and she was like, hey, like I see you kind of like squawking stuff online. And she's like, I think that you're saying good stuff, but like it reminds me of how we grew up, where you kind of feel like you
Okay.
have to say these things. So I
Mhm.
don't think there was a moment where I was like, I'm gonna be the voice, but I do think there was a time where I was trying to be loud to be a part of the chorus. And it weren't bad beliefs. Like I don't think being like pro women or pro trans people or pro, I don't think trying to elevate Black voices is a bad stance, but I saw where she was like, hey, I see you doing these things. And she's like, from my perspective and from knowing you and from coming out of our childhood, I can see where this can be performative and feel false, or not false, but feel
Yeah.
like more fear-based than like just out of like wanting to elevate. And so I think when I caught myself in that, I'm like, am I doing this for, what am I doing this for? And
Yeah.
so I had to, what is my version of authenticity? What is my version of coming correct? And I think where I can do that is by just being natural and by, again, asking questions, to like more just hanging out in the soup rather than having to be
Yeah.
like, because again, I'm a 35-year-old white guy from like middle class suburbs. Like, yes, I can speak to my own internal gender world, but like it's not that radical. I can speak to my parents' struggles with money and or my own addiction and like food addiction. I can speak to all my lived experiences, but it's like,
Yeah.
do I need to be the loud guy? Like, I don't really need to be
Hmm.
loud. There are other voices. I'd rather read someone and be like, hey, I read this, it's cool,
Yeah.
than come with my own and the leader. It's like, so it took me a long time to, I think when a lot of kids leave the church, they want to replace that hole with something. And I think that's where you really find a lot of former Christians like shoving in new God structures. And I think there's, in the right and left, there's a lot of easy places for people to fall into performative, obedient parroting of messages without even really knowing what they believe. And so I had to deconstruct every sort of uh, hierarchical structure for myself, and just inspect it and be like, who am I? What am I? Who am I serving? Where is this going?
Hey, Perry here. I am a loyal It's Giving follower because my wife, Ingela Travers-Hayward, will file for divorce if I'm not. If you want to support a fully independent podcast that is talking about the pulse of activism and where it intersects with music, then just hit that subscribe button. You have no idea how much it helps. And now, I'll quit talking, which is incredibly hard for me to do, and get you back to the episode.
Do you think, and apologies if this comes off sounding so ignorant, I'm a Canadian that was barely raised around religion, or to say I was barely raised around religion is an understatement, but do you feel like did being raised in the church help you navigate this, what you're going through now at all, in the sense of like you've evidently thought a lot about how you want to come across and talk and what you want to talk about and how you want to talk about, did being raised in the church help you figure that out at all?
Maybe like the having something so precious that I lost is probably a good
Hmm.
lesson. My parents, again, coming from a very meager means, they used church kind of as their climb. Like my dad left, like he went to go to Bible college, and his being a preacher or like a missionary was his way
Yeah.
out of poverty. Like that was basically like joining the army. It's like there's
Yeah.
the my favorite System of a Down lyric, like talking about, post 9/11 war. They say, why do they always send the poor? Right. And it's like, you look at church work, you look at military industrialization, you look at all this, and it's always sending these working class young people
Hmm.
who don't have any way to get out, right? So I think being raised in a sort of fundamentalist, like one brain cell type of thing, and having to deconstruct that in my teens, and having lived my entire life thinking how valuable it was, and then to find this, be like, oh, do I really mean this? Like that was so, I think I went through a thing that most people go through later, like death of the dream, death of the, like my parents are older than most of my friends' parents. So I watched my parents kind of get foggy brained quicker than a lot of stuff. Like I lost my faith at 18. So I think I went through some earlier death cycles. And it could be anyone, maybe if you grew up apolitical or a-religious, something's, everyone finds something, right? Your favorite band gets canceled, or your first breakup. Like everybody, you eventually find out the world is not in service of you at some point. But I think I did have a unique ability to go through like a world ending process. And church is obviously, there are so many negatives to being handed a big dogma as a child, but there is really cool things of like spiritual inspection, looking inward, trying to find answers that I think I'm a gooey, soft kid. And I think that stuff really, really landed with me and really like, I did like that. I loved, and the music was informative, right? Spiritual, soft, introspective, seeking. And so now I'm kind of like witchy and, I like my meditation and my, I'm on my vitamins. Maybe it's just new religion, but I'm always looking for something.
Figure out what works for you. I think we're all just trying to make it through the day. So if it's a couple vitamins that's helping, you know what, do what you got to do. But I think so one of the things that I really want to ask you about, especially because you talked about people being performative and stuff like that. So one thing where with everything, all the interviews you've done that I read, where you talk about, your mental health, you talk about your sobriety, I feel like those are two things that a lot of people talk about. I feel like it's great that those things are talked about, but I feel like unlike how you've spoken about them, I do feel like a lot of those two things have become sort of buzzwords, and I'm curious how, as someone who has experienced both of those things, how do you feel like those are talked about within the world of music? How do you feel like the conversation is around them? Do you think it's in a positive place, or is it sort of this thing where people know that they have to say, yes, I support people taking care of their mental health, but it sort of feels a little disingenuous? I'm curious your take on that.
It's so sticky and weird because obviously like anything that's good for you will immediately be commoditized and then sold back to you in product form, in social media. Like right now, it's like, I feel like once a year, not even more than once a year, like almost every friend I have in the business has done the like cancel the tour, the big dramatic, like I'm stepping away for me. And then the comment sections is flooded with, you're so brave, like, take care of yourself, girly, like, but then the second we decide we want to exploit ourselves again, everyone's like, woo, like they're going back on tour. And so I was saying this to my therapist or this week, like, hilarious. So I'm name dropping therapy because like, the word therapy is like buzzy. It's like, as soon as the sort of whisper folk confessional thing popped off of people being like, I ghosted my therapist, is like the most radical, crazy lyric. But I don't know who I was talking about this week, but we as artists are the factory owner and the wage laborer. Like we are the exploiter and the exploited. We do it to ourselves. So there's not even anyone to blame anymore. There's no, like, my manager doesn't make me do anything. Like she cheers for it. She's obviously like motivated. If I work, that's good. It's good for her. It's good for me, good for everyone. But who's going to stop the train if you're on tour and the only way to make it through seems like either getting fucked up or killing yourself or leaning into whatever your substance is? I do think that mental health and sobriety are real and important. All of us have a mental health, right? But I'm like on my physical health, I'm on my spiritual health, I'm on my, what am I eating? How am I moving my body? How am I talking to my band and my crew. Like, I
Yeah.
think that there's ethics of how you lead. But none of this shit is, there's no centralized handbook, right? So every band has a different ethos, every artist, and you see reactions, right? So if there's a trend of mental health, then there's going to be a reaction. There's going to be bands that are like, we're not talking about that. We're drinking 1,000 beers on stage,
Yeah.
basically middle fingers to anything that resembles health, because we need a signal that we're not a part of that cringy thing. So there's just constant swinging. But for me, yes, as cringy as anything is, like, I mean, I 20 years ago, did I think I was going to be running and stretching and taking vitamins and talking about, meditation or like having a membership to a sauna? Like, no, you live long enough to see yourself become cringy or uncle or whatever it is. But I want to live a long time and I want my career to go a long time. So all of a sudden, like, the Rolling Stones don't look like crusty, dried up old raisins to me. I'm like, wow, that's so cool that they have a career still, right? I reframe, and someone canceling a tour, it doesn't look like a lame cry for help to me. I'm like, that's so sick that they are doing that. I hope they don't die, And
Yeah.
I mean, it is. I saw like a Pigeons and Planes article about like the death of confessional music, because they were saying like, they're kind of saying like Gracie Abrams' new album is a flop, and like basically confessing. Yeah, it's like people are saying confessing your inner thoughts isn't enough anymore, right? It has to be compelling. There has to be a reason. So yeah, I can't just get on stage and say like, I had a fight with my partner or my mom doesn't understand me, right? It's like there has to be an angle, and I think that's the same thing with mental health and sobriety and all the buzzy shit. It's like, what is your version of it? And again, it's crazy because as soon as I started opening up about getting diagnosed with bipolar and getting sober and stepping away and taking a break from touring, now it's a part of the press release, right? It's like, it is this new album is like, it's his sobriety album, right? And it's like, you can't undo the commoditization. Whenever I choose to have a kid or something, then it'll be like, that's his fatherhood album. It's like, so now I'm
He's the
selling
daddy
the story of,
now.
yeah, right. You spawn and it's part of the financial institutions, like, right? Or artists turn into, yeah, it becomes a part of the brand. Like, when I did ask my therapist, I was like, how do I know if I'm a narcissist? And he's like, well, your work is you are part of your brand. So he's like, if you're a good worker, of course you're inspecting your product, and your product happens to be you. That is like kind of a fucked up trap, like, and hard to navigate, right? Because I am looking at videos of myself and being like, dude, I come across right. I'm like listening to my own songs, being like, is that how I want to appear? Is this the lyric that I want to sing on stage for the next 30 years? I'm thinking in more about, back to our earlier question, if I have a platform, I'm now taking what I say more seriously. And I still want Medium Build to be a place where I'm free and unedited, but I can't write a song now without thinking, is this how I want to feel? Do I want to live in this emotion for the rest of my life, right? Because there's songs I wrote 10 years ago that I didn't think about, and now I'm singing them every night and I have to relive those emotions. It's like, wow, I'm in this. Do I want to stay here? And some songs are nasty, and you get to do a little preamble to the crowd, like, hey, this is how I really felt, and this is how I really thought. And luckily I'm not that guy anymore, but this guy was sick and I don't want to silence him. It's good to give a lot of emotions space. And I think that's sort of my reframe of, I don't know, mental health and growing and watching yourself become a wellness influencer.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, the way that you talk, like, you're completely right, is that like when you decide to talk about something, be it sobriety, a bipolar disorder, if it becomes fatherhood, something like that, is it With the experiences in your life that you've gone through so far and talking about them, how does it feel? Because I assume people come up and then will talk to you about either your own or their own, what they've gone through. How does that feel to now sort of have to talk about this stuff so much more?
I definitely feel it's complicated. There's a part of me that really feels proud, right? Like,
Yeah.
or, I think that's the kind of the double-edged sword with any of this sort of, I think what conservatives would criticize like our team as like wokeness or like, political stuff and like getting to talk about gender or sexual identity or sobriety or mental health. Like there's always going to be the cringy version of it, right? The performative version of it, the commoditized, like the how do we put a rainbow on this, like the pride capitalism. But then there's the real bit, right? Like I first, when I started like kind of having buzz, I told my manager, I was like, I don't want to be a voice for any queer shit. I don't want to talk about any of that stuff because I don't want to be the head. I would just rather be a voice in the crowd, not trying to be a signal. And then I started like zooming out and I thought about like a chubby queer kid growing up in a Christian Southern environment. I like pictured myself at like 12 and I was like, if anyone could hear any message that makes them like themselves more or accept themselves more, that's a positive thing. So I have to like remove I'm too aware, right? I'm online. I've lived long enough to see cycles. I've seen MySpace to Facebook to Tumblr to Instagram to TikTok. I've watched bands up and down 27 times, right? So I know too much that gets me in my little, I'm not going to say anything, but a 10-year-old, my 15-year-old niece, she doesn't know that stuff she just sees a person she likes waving a trans flag and she's like, that's fucking sick. Like that makes me feel safe. And so I don't have to, when I think about, someone DMing me being like, hey, my brother committed suicide, your song helps me X, or I had a really hard marriage and I'm out of it. And this song, blah, 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 or you talking about this made me feel safe. Or, hey, I have bipolar 2. I've never been able to put words on it. You talked about it and you said exactly how I feel. I'm not like, oh, hell yeah, because I'm so great. I'm just like, cool. I said some stuff. You feel seen. That's as big of it. There's a victory there. It is.
Yeah.
The work is done. And it's not even work, right? I'm just living. I feel the same way about 1,000 things I've consumed, right? I consume stuff all day, every day since I was 10 years old and I started buying CDs. And so I'd rather just feel like I'm just a like flangey thing in the amoeba that is all of us, instead of like I'm a powerful voice or commentator. Like I don't want to be looked at as the, it's really a hard line. I don't want to like, I don't really want any power, but you have power.